Charles Chiumia from the African Union Commission. We'll just give a chance to more people to join in. So for that, I think we'll just give 5 minutes. Then thereafter, we are going to continue with our engagement for today. So let's give that allowance, then we'll begin our meeting. This is Chiza Charles Jumia. I want to welcome you to the third day of our workshop. So while we still wait for others to join in, I'm just going to give a brief and quick recap of so far what we have done in the past 2 days. So we started our workshop on Wednesday with an introduction. The introduction, of course, had the 2 components. The first component was that we wanted to ground our workshop on the African Union Boosting Inter-African Trade Action Plan. So we had an overview of the AU Boosting Inter-African Trade Action Plan, but majorly we zeroed in on the trade policy cluster of the action plan, where we found the action that relates to trade policy dialogue, stakeholder engagement. Then thereafter, we had a presentation, which was an overview on the trade policy dialogue, what in theory needs to happen when you are conducting trade policy dialogue. This covered a number of items, including why it is important to have trade policy dialogues. Also, how do you identify stakeholders when you want to do trade policy dialogue? What are the possible topics that you could consider when doing trade policy dialogues? Then we concluded the day by looking at how to establish sustainable trade policy engagement platforms. We had a good exchange on that, which was really enriching. Yesterday, we went a bit practical by focusing on the AfCFTA and women entrepreneurship. We looked at 3 broad topics: the issue of standards, the issue of trade facilitation, as well as the trading services, as well as digital trade in that regard, to say how can women entrepreneurs take advantage of the AfCFTA by looking at these 3 areas going forward. Then thereafter, we continued with the experience sharing by a panel of 3 women in business, as well as discussions on what are the perspectives on what they see on how best they could take advantage of the AfCFTA. We also had rich discussions on that, and a lot of lessons that we learned, some of which will form part of the recommendations. So that is a general overview of the 3 days of our workshop. Then today, we are also going to be more practical, but this time looking at the regional economic communities, especially the secretariats, and how do they do trade policy dialogues in their respective regions. And we have experts from the 3 regional economic communities, SADC, EAC, and as well as ECCAS. We have confirmation that EAC is here. If colleagues from SADC as well as the ECCAS are here, kindly reach out to us so that we know that you are here. But without wasting much time, would want to begin with the East African community to share their experience on how they conduct trade policy dialogues in the region. Once again, we just want to inform you that interpretation is available in English and French. You can use the facility on the bottom of your skin, on the bottom of your screen, not your skin. We haven't reached that level of sophistication yet. So interpretation is available in English and French. Again, we would like to encourage you to use the chat box if you have any questions or reflections on the things that will be presented. We'll be looking at the chat now and then to see what is building. We can have a discussion around the issues that are being raised there. So once again, we'd like to ask colleagues from SADC and ECCAS to reach out to us if you are here so that we give you a slot. But having said that, now it's a chance for me to invite Mr. Geoffrey Osoro from EAC to make his intervention in regards to the topic on how they conduct stakeholder engagement for trade policy dialogue in the region. Mr. Osoro, you have 15 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Geoffrey Osoro from the EAC Secretariat. We are joining this discussion late, and so we have missed out on some of the critical discussions that were held earlier, yesterday and also today. And so in that regard, we hope that the information that we are going to share is still relevant. Now, the information that we are sharing with you is based on a very broad perspective. And it relates to how we engage with the EAC partner states and also the stakeholders within the partner states. Now, as you are all aware, the EAC is a customs union, and therefore we are implementing a common trade policy. We work as an entity. We are expected to develop our programs as a group and also to implement them as a group. Now, engagements with stakeholders are conducted at two levels. That is in regard to the policy, trade policy. One, the first level of engagement is in respect to the development of trade policy frameworks and also implementation of the trade policy frameworks, basically the regional integration program. And the second level is in respect to engagement in order to develop negotiating positions for engagement with the third parties in situations where we have negotiations with external partners, for instance, the UK, the EU, and the rest, who are external to the EAC community. Then, of course, we engage with the various stakeholders to develop our negotiating texts. Now, I'll first of all dwell on the first level of engagement, and that is on implementation of the regional integration program. And here, I think the first important thing to note is that we do have institutional frameworks that have been established in all the EAC partner states in order to ensure and facilitate engagement on a continuous basis on trade policy matters. And so in that regard, at the partner states level, we have specific ministries that are responsible for EAC affairs. All the EAC partner states, as we prefer to call them, because our integration is based on a partnership. All of them have established ministries that are responsible for EAC integration matters. But further to that, we also have committees that have been established at the national level in all the EAC ministries. And these committees ensure not only the implementation, timely implementation, but also monitoring and evaluation of the regional integration programs, and also reporting on the progress that has been made, also highlighting challenges as they occur. And then we also have special purpose committees, both at the national and regional levels. And I'll give you an example. We have special purpose committees, the national monitoring committees on NTBs and non-tariff barriers. We also have regional forums which attend to matters of NTBs. But we don't stop there. We also have both in respect to other trade facilitation matters. And then we have the special national and regional task forces, which have recently become very important because of the emerging pandemic that is COVID-19. And so in that regard, we have the national and regional task forces comprising of various stakeholders who we engage on how to implement programs that have been developed, again, through consultation with the various stakeholders, how to implement those programs that have been developed to ensure that trade does occur and that we also minimize collectively the spread of COVID-19 across the borders. And then obviously we have the sector ministerial committees and the council. These are all at the apex. Now, engagements at the policy making stage. Partner states representatives who comprise of the various stakeholders, both public and private sectors, are involved in taking decisions regarding developing policy frameworks that are expected to deepen and strengthen regional integration. And so the input of all the stakeholders is key and very relevant from the various perspectives. The private sector, the business associations, both at the national and regional level, including the EABC. We also have other key organizations who participate in the formulation of the policy frameworks and also in monitoring their implementation. Now, in situations where studies or analytical papers are required to facilitate decision-making, especially in developing new policies to attend to new requirements and needs, again, we follow a very comprehensive process of involving and engaging all level of stakeholders at the national level, for instance, through the committees that I talked about earlier. Those committees bring together the private sector, the academia, in some cases, the civil society, the consumer groups, the women organizations, if they are organized and have been participating in such programs, all their perspectives and input is taken into account when assessing some of these studies and analytical papers to make sure that they do represent the interests of these various groups, and that the implementation in the future will be taken up by them because this is necessary to ensure that we encourage full participation. There is a very high level of transparency, accountability, including responsibility and ownership. So you find that such engagement then is critical not only at formulation stage, but later in the implementation stage as well. Because if you do not fully involve them, then obviously challenges will arise in terms of implementation because of the low level of ownership. And even if you proceed with implementation, accountability will be a key issue that will have to be addressed at a later stage. Now, implementation obviously follows a similar process. There is continuous engagement of all the stakeholders who are briefed continuously on the progress being made. And if there are challenges that are being experienced, which were not expected in the formulation stage of these policies, despite engagement of all the stakeholders, then these challenges are collectively considered again with the stakeholders' involvement, and then resolutions agreed. Resolutions which would serve the interests, again, of all the stakeholders, ensuring that none is disadvantaged whatsoever. Now, in terms of reporting, the national committees, by virtue of the primary role that they play and the mandate that they do develop reports, produce reports that are then discussed at the regional forums all the way to the council. But there's also a very key forum that has since been put into place by the EAC, and that is the annual regional EAC Integration Forum, which brings on board all the stakeholders again from the various interest groups, private sector, civil society, including the politicians. They also do attend to look critically at the integration agenda, evaluate it comprehensively, look at the implementation progress that is being attained, look at the key challenges that are being experienced, look at the emerging issues that might threaten the EAC Integration Forum, look at the perspectives as they regard to third-party involvement in the integration initiative. Say, for instance, the agreements that we are negotiating. And on the basis of that, chart a way forward. So that is a very important forum which happens annually and brings on board, as I said, all the relevant stakeholders. It is what we call an open forum that we encourage everybody to come in and participate. And we do get experts coming in from all fields in order to make presentations so that we can look at them from their point of view, the experiences that they have been obtained elsewhere, and see whether any of them may be relevant towards adopting new solutions to the challenges that we face, or new initiatives that could fast track our integration agenda and therefore deliver the benefits that are so desirable for us as a regional community. Now, in terms of engagements with the third parties, as I said earlier, EAC is implementing a common trade policy as a customs union. And by virtue of that, we have to collectively agree on the negotiating text that we should take to any negotiations with third parties. And even the CFTA, we have to meet among ourselves. Those preparatory stages start all the way from the national level, where the issues that will be considered in any agenda, even if it is tariffs or services, liberalization, rules of origin, or any other matter for that is looked at the national level, and negotiating positions developed at that level. Now, these national positions are then taken up to the regional forums, preparatory meetings where we consolidate our positions based on input from the national level. And on that basis, develop a regional negotiating text that we take forward to negotiations with the third parties. And the same process is also followed when we do consider studies that would assist us in, for instance, formulating our negotiating positions, just as an example, on rules of origin. We might prefer to do our own studies to assist the process, and those studies and analytical papers or works are discussed comprehensively at the national level, positions developed, obviously with the involvement of all the stakeholders who are key to this process. And those positions again taken to the regional level where it is consolidated, harmonized to formulate a regional negotiating position. Now, in terms of the lessons that we have learned, obviously, the insistence on inclusivity that in involving all the stakeholders through the processes that I've elaborated, the instance of the need to pursue ownership and accountability makes it therefore a very, very elaborate program so as to ensure and complete the circle of national and regional level engagements to prepare, look at the implementation processes, develop negotiating texts, make sure that all interests are taken into account. That takes a lot of time. And that obviously can have an impact on the level of implementation. For instance, there could be certain delayed implementation of regional programs due to the very lengthy and elaborate and all-inclusive processes that are so desirable for us as a customs union to make sure that we move forward as a group, as an entity. The issue of sustainability, I talked about the relevant institutions, both at the national and the regional level, that are key in implementing these programs. But again, just to say that there are challenges that are being experienced here because of the budgetary resource requirements to ensure that all of those institutions that are in place and which have been charged and mandated with implementing and overseeing these regional programs do undertake their activities in a timely manner and therefore pursue and obtain the results that are expected out of them. So by virtue of the fact that we do have budgetary shortfalls every now and again, obviously that threatens the implementation of those work programs, both at the national and regional level. And this obviously can have an impact on the quality of results that we obtain finally. So the solution here, obviously, then is to ensure that at the national level, we provide adequate resources to the ministries that run these programs, ensure that they do have sufficient resources and the capabilities that they require, not only in terms of finances, but also the technical level needs that they do have in order to discharge their mandates successfully. At the regional level, we also do sometimes face certain challenges that are very similar to that in terms of resources, availability, and that too has a similar outcome with that at the national level. If resources are not adequate, you cannot have your meetings as you should, and therefore there are delays as we mobilize resources. Luckily, we do sometimes have cooperating partners, bilateral donors who come out to assist some of the program activities, but that is only perhaps dependent upon in the short to medium term. In the long term, we'll also have to be self-reliant, and therefore the need to ensure that we work towards that objective. Now, one of the solutions that we have agreed to in order to resolve some of the issues that relate to delayed engagements, obviously the use of VC meetings, Zoom, and other tools. That too at the national level is now being used to engage all the other parties and partners and interest groups in order to formulate positions that they should, where they do run short of resources. We also have capacity issues. This is an important lesson. And that comes about as a result of multiplicity of engagements that draw upon the same capacities that we have at the national and regional level. An example is like the one we're having now. We are having various other meetings happening at the same time, and that is drawing heavily on the capacities that we have. And so maybe a solution here is that we should align and harmonize our programs to ensure that they do not clash. I think one other area that I would like to emphasize is the open forums. They have been very useful, and because they have brought together all the stakeholders, and they have usually been very candid forums where discussions are held openly. There's no holding back on any issue, and that has assisted a lot in trying to evaluate where we are going wrong, where we are going right, and where we can emphasize more, and so on and so forth. But again, as I said, those forums also draw on resources, and therefore they need to continuously mobilize funds so as to convene them as and when appropriate, and also to facilitate the key experts that come to assist us through that. So those are the information that's the information that I wish to share with you concerning our engagements with all our stakeholders who we think we are responsible for. It is because of them that we do the work that we are here to do. So thank you very much for listening to us, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Osolo, for your presentation. It has been very clear on how the EAC, as a regional economic community, goes out to engage its stakeholders in trade policy making. You have highlighted a number of issues, including the challenges that are there. We have one or two questions for you in the chat box that later on will give you a chance to respond to. But meanwhile, you can look at the chat and prepare your responses accordingly. But at an opportune time, we'll give you to respond for everyone to hear. Right now, let's continue with our program. We want to give now a chance to the economic community for Central African states, ECCAS. We have the Director of Trade from ECCAS. Yes, he has joined us, Mr. Jacob Kocho. So, Mr. Jacob Kocho, it's now your time to make your presentation. You have 15 minutes for us to learn from ECCAS experience in trade policy dialogue. We would appreciate to see you, and if you could put your video on when making the presentation, it would be very much appreciated. Once again, Mr. Jacob, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Bonjour, monsieur le modérateur. Je suis Jacob Kocho. Je suis le chef du service commerce, douane et industrie à la CEAC. Je vous remercie pour votre invitation à participer à cette activité. Je dois m'excuser du fait que nous n'ayons pas pu prendre part aux travaux qui ont commencé depuis 2 jours. Cette situation traduit un des défis auxquels nous faisons face en ce moment, qui a d'ailleurs été très éloquemment présenté par mon prédécesseur, celui de la multiplicité des engagements qui vont croissant en raison de l'utilisation de l'outil informatique aujourd'hui pour l'organisation des activités de dialogue. Les demandes explosent et la disponibilité de la ressource en termes humains pour répondre aux demandes est limitée, et donc on est obligé de faire des arbitrages. Depuis le début de la semaine, nous sommes sollicités au niveau de l'Union africaine dans le cadre des réunions préparatoires du sommet qui est le sommet de l'Union africaine qui est prévu le 5 décembre prochain sur la zone de libre-échange continentale. Et donc, nous avons très peu de ressources humaines. Nous sommes totalement concentrés à accompagner les États dans ce processus-là. Et donc, c'est la raison pour laquelle nous n'avons pas pu mobiliser les personnes pour participer depuis le début de la réunion. Mais toutefois, j'ai suivi avec grande attention l'exposé du collègue de l'East African Community qui reflète dans une très très large mesure la réalité que nous vivons également au niveau de la CEAC en ce qui concerne l'élaboration et la mise en œuvre des politiques commerciales. Je voudrais faire quelques observations additionnelles concernant le processus d'élaboration des politiques commerciales, de leur adoption, de la mise en œuvre et de son évaluation au niveau de la CEAC. Comme vous le savez, la CEAC est une organisation d'intégration régionale qui a l'ambition de devenir un marché commun et plus tard une union économique. Au stade actuel de sa mise en œuvre, la CEAC est une zone de libre-échange et les travaux pour l'établissement de l'union douanière sont en cours et vont certainement déboucher très prochainement à l'adoption d'un tarif extérieur commun et d'autres instruments tels que le Code communautaire des douanes et d'autres instruments opérationnels concernant l'élimination des barrières non tarifaires et ainsi de suite. Pour l'élaboration des politiques communautaires concernant l'intégration économique et commerciale, généralement, la première étape consiste à réaliser une étude qui fait un état des lieux. Et généralement aussi, l'étude est réalisée par une expertise externe, c'est-à-dire qu'on mobilise un consultant individuel ou une firme de consultation qui va réaliser un état des lieux participatif. Dans le cadre de la réalisation de cet état des lieux, généralement, une enquête est réalisée auprès des différentes catégories de parties prenantes. Les administrations publiques nationales, les opérateurs du secteur privé, les organisations de producteurs, les syndicats du patronat, et ainsi de suite, pour obtenir leurs avis, leurs opinions concernant l'instrument de politique communautaire ou l'instrument de droit communautaire que nous sommes en train de programmer, d'essayer d'élaborer. Sur la base de des opinions collectées, le prestataire externe va nous élaborer un rapport sur l'état des lieux avec des recommandations et des projets de documents de politique communautaire ou alors des projets de textes communautaires qui vont être consacrés pour encadrer la coopération des États dans l'aspect concerné. Et donc, à ce stade, généralement, les consultations se font non seulement auprès du ministère du Commerce, qui est le ministère sectoriel compétent, mais également auprès d'autres ministères sectoriels dans la mesure où la politique commerciale est dans une certaine mesure transversale et implique d'autres départements ministériels tels que le département en charge de l'industrie. Quand il n'est pas lié au commerce, le département en charge des politiques agricoles, le département en charge des questions d'élevage et des organisations en charge de la normalisation, et ainsi de suite. Donc, les acteurs qui sont impliqués dans les consultations préalables sont assez variés et interviennent dans des domaines qui vont un peu au-delà de la stricte politique commerciale elle-même. Quand on a réalisé l'état des lieux participatifs et que les projets de documents de politique communautaire ou alors les textes communautaires sont proposés par le prestataire externe, nous, au niveau de l'organe exécutif régional, nous relisons ces documents et nous préparons les instruments et les documents pour l'adoption. Et ça me permet de passer à l'autre étape de l'engagement avec les parties prenantes. Dans le processus d'adoption, il y a plusieurs étapes. L'adoption se fait d'abord au plan purement technique avec les ministères sectoriels concernés. Et généralement, ça se fait dans le cadre du comité technique sectoriel qui est mis en place par le traité, le comité technique commerce, douane et industrie et immigration. qui réunit les représentants des ministères sectoriels des États membres, notamment le commerce, les finances, c'est-à-dire les douaniers. Et en cas de besoin, on peut inviter les représentants d'autres ministères sectoriels si la question qui est en débat requiert leurs compétences. Et au cours de ce comité technique, les documents sont soumis à l'examen et à la validation des experts des États membres. Quand ils les ont validés, et le rapport de leur réunion de validation va être annexé au projet adopté par eux et soumis aux instances statutaires de décision. Les instances statutaires de décision qui sont le Conseil des ministres et sa cellule d'experts ou le sommet en fonction de la nature de l'instrument. Si c'est un règlement communautaire que nous voulons édicter, ce sera le Conseil des ministres qui prendra la décision, qui va l'adopter, puisque c'est le mode d'action du Conseil des ministres qui est adopté par le traité. Et si c'est une décision communautaire, elle va être prise par le sommet des chefs d'État. Mais avant que le projet de décision n'arrive au sommet des chefs d'État, il sera examiné par le Conseil des ministres et approuvé, puis transmis au sommet des chefs d'État, à la conférence des chefs d'État pour adoption. Et dès lors que c'est adopté, en principe, la décision ou le règlement ont force obligatoire à l'égard des États membres 30 jours après leur publication au journal officiel de la communauté. Cela nous impose donc, en tant qu'organe exécutif de la communauté, de produire un journal officiel qui va rendre public les décisions prises par le Conseil par la conférence des chefs d'État ou le règlement adopté par le Conseil des ministres. Et quand ce journal officiel est élaboré, nous le transmettons formellement par correspondance officielle aux États membres, au ministère des États membres, en passant par le ministère des Affaires extérieures pour leur notifier la décision prise dans la perspective de son application 30 jours après la publication du journal officiel. Maintenant, après l'adoption, vient la phase de la mise en œuvre. Et dans la mise en œuvre, généralement, les intervenants sont essentiellement les États membres, parce que les politiques communautaires sont mises en œuvre au niveau des États membres. La communauté n'a pas un territoire autre que le territoire des États membres. Et sur le territoire des États membres, c'est les administrations publiques qui ont la responsabilité de la mise en œuvre des politiques. Et donc, c'est les administrations nationales qui sont au premier rang de la mise en œuvre des politiques publiques. Et nous en tant qu'organe exécutif communautaire, nous allons faire le suivi de la mise en œuvre à travers les réunions régulières avec les différents acteurs du secteur public ou du secteur privé en fonction du niveau d'engagement nécessaire. Par exemple, si on prend les procédures concernant la mise en œuvre des instruments de la zone de libre-échange. Au jour d'aujourd'hui, on a beaucoup de difficultés à faire intégrer au sein des politiques du corpus réglementaire national toutes les décisions prises pour l'implémentation de la zone de libre-échange. Parce que vous savez que les administrations douanières au niveau des États n'agissent que sur la base des instructions qu'ils reçoivent dans la loi des finances. Donc, s'il y a une décision communautaire qui est prise et qui n'est pas traduite dans la loi des finances, les administrations douanières auront de la peine à les impliquer. Or, le ministère qui est en charge d'élaborer la loi des finances, ce n'est pas le ministère du Commerce. Et donc, le ministère du Commerce, lui, il va entrer en négociation avec le ministère des Finances qui élabore la loi des finances pour que les décisions communautaires concernant la politique commerciale, les instruments de la zone de libre-échange soient intégrés. Or, cela n'est pas toujours une chose acquise. Il y a des États où, depuis des années, on n'a pas pu obtenir que le tarif préférentiel communautaire, par exemple, soit inséré dans la loi des finances et dont les douaniers de ces États n'appliquent pas le tarif préférentiel aux produits originaires de la communauté qui proviennent des autres États membres. Et donc, il y a un ensemble de difficultés en termes de dysfonctionnement liées à l'implication de différentes catégories d'acteurs qu'on observe dans le processus de coopération entre les intervenants pour la mise en œuvre des politiques commerciales. Maintenant, il y a 2 ou 3 challenges que je pourrais évoquer et je vais m'arrêter là. Le premier, c'est la disponibilité des ressources financières. Conduire le dialogue et l'implication des acteurs et des parties prenantes dans l'élaboration, l'adoption, la mise en œuvre et l'évaluation des politiques commerciales nécessite d'importantes ressources financières. Or, les budgets des secrétariats ne sont pas toujours suffisants pour pouvoir soutenir et financer ces activités. On fait donc recours à l'aide publique, aux appuis des partenaires techniques pour organiser les réunions, financer les études, faire le suivi de la mise en œuvre des politiques, organiser les études d'évaluation de la mise en œuvre des politiques. Et cela est un problème parce que si nous voulons mener notre processus de manière autonome, nous devons pouvoir être capables de financer par nous-mêmes les activités nécessaires et l'implication des différentes parties prenantes. Le deuxième challenge que je voulais porter à votre attention, c'est la difficulté en termes de disponibilité de ressources humaines. La ressource humaine en qualité et en quantité est un défi énorme. La charge du travail est très importante. Les personnes disponibles sont insuffisantes. La raison principale, c'est que les secrétariats n'ont pas toujours les ressources nécessaires pour payer les salaires du nombre de personnes nécessaires pour conduire l'ensemble des processus pour la mise en œuvre, la conception des politiques commerciales. Et donc, ça nous pose un problème. D'autre part, on a souvent affaire à des intervenants, à des personnes au sein des États et même au niveau de la communauté qui ont une connaissance limitée de l'objet en question, c'est-à-dire la politique commerciale. On a beaucoup de fonctionnaires. On a beaucoup de fonctionnaires au niveau on a beaucoup de fonctionnaires au niveau des États membres qui n'ont pas la formation requise en matière de politique commerciale pour être capables d'interagir de manière efficiente dans la conduite de la politique commerciale depuis sa conception jusqu'à son évaluation. Et cela demande que soit mis en place un programme de renforcement des capacités, de formation des intervenants sur la politique commerciale, parce que c'est un métier, ce n'est pas un domaine où on prendra tout le monde qui a fait des formations générales ou des formations d'initiation élémentaire pour venir conduire la politique commerciale d'un État ou d'une communauté. Il y a un besoin de renforcement de capacités, de formation des gens et de spécialisation même. Parce que la politique commerciale a une infinité de domaines. Avoir même une formation en politique commerciale ne fait pas de la personne concernée un expert en propriété intellectuelle. Et donc, il y a un besoin de spécialisation pour que les acteurs qui interagissent sachent exactement de quoi il s'agit, de quoi ils parlent, quels sont les problèmes qui se posent, quels sont les déterminants de ces problèmes-là et quelles sont les approches de solutions qui peuvent être proposées pour le renforcement de la coopération entre les États et en définitive la contribution au développement économique des États membres. Monsieur le modérateur, je voudrais m'arrêter ici en sollicitant votre indulgence parce que la présentation que je fais n'a pas été préparée et je l'ai faite comme ça par l'expérience quotidienne que j'ai du travail d'élaboration, d'adoption, de mise en œuvre et d'évaluation des politiques commerciales au sein de la SADC. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Mr. Director. You have given us a very wonderful presentation, even though you said you have not prepared for it, but I think it was very clear. You highlighted the various steps that ECCAS does when it's doing stakeholder engagement in trade policy. You also highlighted some of the challenges that ECCAS faces, which I think are similar to what Mr. Osoro from EAC also highlighted. You also emphasized the need for capacity building on the people that actually carry out this stakeholder dialogue engagement. We really appreciate that, and we really also appreciate your presence for this meeting, albeit at a very short notice. we understand the heavy requirements that we have, especially with the ongoing processes under the African Continental Free Trade Area, in which all the regional economics are currently, regional economic communities are currently engaged. Just to confirm now, do we have a representative from the SADC Secretariat to make a presentation? I think up to now, we still do not have a representative from the SADC Secretariat. But having said that, we are glad that we were able to have both ECCAS as well as EAC to share their experiences. At this point in time, I would like to give an opportunity once again to ECCAS, but also our colleague from ECCAS to tackle the questions that have come in, especially from the chat box. So far, I think there are 3. The first question is that in the EAC, is there a national entry point for regional trade policy formulation? Is it the Ministry of EAC Affairs? Is it the Ministry of Trade? Is it another entity altogether? Then another question, I think it's also from the EAC, is that is there a mechanism where citizens of the countries can reach out to the EAC, especially for formulation of negotiating positions? Then we also have another question from Madam Evelyn Mutoni, who would like to be involved in the implementation of trade policies in EAC. She says even at a junior position, but I think you do not really need a junior position to get involved, but I'm sure Mr. Osoro is going to highlight that. Then there is one question from ECCAS, which my colleague Maule, I think, can read in good French. But let's first of all hear from Mr. Osoro on the 3 questions that have been posed. Mr. Osoro, you have the floor. Mr. Osoro, you are mute. Unmute yourself. Thank you.
I hope you can hear me now. Okay, sorry about that.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to appreciate the questions that have been posed. And I also want to say these are key questions. Now, in terms of the entry point, the treaty prescribes that the EAC ministries or the EAC affairs ministries are the coordinating organs on the implementation of EAC programs at the national level. And therefore, our engagement is usually directly with the ministries of EAC. There are certain situations where the partner state concerned has written to say that on the negotiation of this agreement, we would like to pass over the mandate, for instance, to the Ministry of Trade. And therefore, in such a situation, you see, there is an express instruction to pass over a responsibility for a certain task. But in terms of general coordination, it is the ministries of EAC affairs who undertake the task. Now, is there a mechanism where citizens can reach out? I'd pointed out earlier that at the national level, we do have the committees that are responsible for coordinating, overseeing, monitoring, evaluating, and reporting on the implementation of EAC programs. And those committees are all inclusive. They involve a number of stakeholders drawn from all the sectors, including interest groups. So I would propose that the poser of this question finds out which of those interest groups would then be suitable for her to reach out to, so that they can be involved in the committee as a stakeholder. I must say that, their participation from whatever field is important, because their interests must be taken into account. The last question was, would like to be involved in the implementation. I think this is a question which, to a large extent, is quite similar to the one that I've just responded to. Obviously, when implementation does take place, when it does occur, there will be an impact on all cluster of stakeholders, perhaps even the one you represent. And therefore, it is necessary that you do oversee in one way or the other the process of implementation, but that can only be done if you reach out to the committee that is mandated with this work at the national level through representation of the interest groups which would best serve your interests. I think that is what I have. Also to emphasize again that we do have that regional forum that I talked about. Now, the regional forum is an open forum, and all stakeholders are allowed to come in and provide input to the discussions that will be ongoing at that time on the regional implementation program. Thank you very much. If there are any other questions, I'll be happy to take them. And I do hope that the answers are provided are adequate. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Osolo, for that. Maule, I saw there was a question in French, but I think it had something to do with the sound. But you can verify that for me?
Yes, Charles, I checked. It was indeed regarding the sound.
Thank you so much. But at this point, I also want to give a chance to the Director of Trade and Industry in ECCAS to also give his final reflections on the subject matter, especially how in ECCAS citizens or interest groups are taken into account when conducting trade policy inquiries or trade policy dialogues. Do you have national points for that, where, for example, associations can go and bring their views in regards to a given specific policy? So, Mr. Jacob, you have the floor now for at least 3 minutes to also reflect on the same question. Thank you.
Ok, merci monsieur le modérateur. Comme l'indiquait notre collègue de l'East African Community, conformément aux dispositions du traité, le ministère des Affaires étrangères est l'instance qui est chargée de la coordination de toutes les dynamiques concernant l'intégration régionale au sein des États membres. Et pour ce qui concerne particulièrement les politiques commerciales, même si le département du marché commun travaille directement avec le ministère du Commerce, au moment de l'adoption des éléments de la politique commerciale, le ministère des Affaires étrangères est l'acteur clé. Maintenant, dans le processus d'élaboration technique, on travaille avec le ministère compétent sectoriel, qui est le ministère du Commerce. Concernant l'organisation de notre interaction avec les citoyens au sein des États, il y a une réflexion qui est en cours. Et dans le traité, le traité révisé de la CEAC qui a été adopté en décembre 2019, il est prévu la mise en place des représentations au sein des États membres. dans chaque État membre, on devrait avoir un bureau de la CEAC auprès duquel chaque citoyen qui a une préoccupation pourrait s'adresser et par courrier discuter avec un expert qui sera désigné. Et nous, au niveau du siège de l'organisation, on devrait travailler avec les bureaux nationaux pour prendre en compte les préoccupations exprimées par les citoyens dans cet engagement direct avec les bureaux au niveau des pays membres. Voilà un peu le dispositif qui est prévu maintenant. On a aidé, on a soutenu par le passé la mise en place des organisations de la société civile pour faciliter le dialogue, notamment l'organisation d'un réseau régional des chambres de commerce. On a facilité la mise en place d'un réseau régional des organisations de femmes commerçantes qui font les activités dans le commerce transfrontalier. On peut effectivement aider à organiser les acteurs dans la perspective d'avoir un dialogue plus direct et plus structuré avec eux dans l'élaboration, la mise en œuvre des politiques commerciales. Voilà quelques éléments additionnels que je peux apporter en réponse à la question que vous m'avez posée et je vous remercie infiniment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jacob. We have been joined by a representative from SADC. I don't know if he's ready to make a presentation. Mr. Alfred Ndabeni from SADC. This is your time to take the floor, and I give you 15 minutes for that. Mr. Alfred Ndabeni.
Chair, thank you very much. Well, I must apologize. I'm in Botswana and I thought the time is 3 o'clock, and I'm realizing that on your side is almost 4 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. So because we are 1 hour ahead, I did not realize, and I'm joining you a bit late. But let me be very, very brief. The subject that is on the table now on engagement of private sector dialogue. On a SADC level, we just established a SADC Business Council last year, and it has not really been fully operational. And this council is going to be spearhead or strengthen the private sector engagement in advancing regional integration issues in SADC. But that does not mean that the private sector has not been involved when it comes to trade policy related issues in the context of regional integration. The way this has been handled, or that our SADC member states did not want to sit on the negotiating table with the private sector. But the mechanism that has been there is that in each of the member states, we have what we call SADC national committees. These are the committees that are responsible for whatever, trade policy related issues or any program that relates to SADC. For instance, if we are preparing for negotiation and these are trade related issues, the ministry that is responsible for this function mainly is the Ministry of Trade in all the member states. If it's like the CFTA or the tripartite FTA or whatever trade policy related issues, that is a committee in a member state that handles some engagement on that specific issue. And in that engagement, they involve stakeholders from the private sector to make some input on the issue on the table. so that that input can help now government officials to engage on the regional level on that specific issue. They believe that private sector can influence a country position on national level than on regional level, because we do not have such a structure where the private sector get involved on any negotiations on regional level. And it has proved to be a bit of a challenge to have a meeting of ministers of trade, and then we have a private sector representatives. Government has not allowed that. They said the private sector can make input through national structures, and their position can be articulated through individual member states' national position on that specific issue. And that is how we have handled it. And what has happened was that government are allowed to, when they propose their delegation to go to a specific meeting on trade-related issues, they can include someone from the private sector in their delegation. But that person is not allowed to speak on behalf of the country. Only the government officials are allowed. So that is how we have engaged the private sector in terms of influencing trade policy related issues, both on regional level and on national level. On the regional level, sometimes they attend, but they attend as observers, as they are not allowed to speak in a meeting of ministers because they are not representing any government. So that has been a trend in SADC, that a private sector can only influence trade policy issues on national level if they participate actively and they assist their national government in trying to define a position on that specific issue. So in short, that is what has been happening. And at this stage, as I said, we only launched the so-called SADC Business Council last year. Right now, we are working on a mechanism in which we can facilitate cooperation between the SADC Business Council and the SADC Secretariat. Where and what structure, where are they going to come in? But in most cases, they may usually sometimes be allowed to come in on technical, in technical meetings where they can make technical input. But when they make that technical input, it must be a technical input that represents a view of a member state, because that is how our structure is works. That only member states negotiate on behalf of a member state. So that is how things are, and that's how our private sector has been influencing trade policy issues on the table. Chair, I think that is all what I can say for now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ndabeni, for highlighting how SADC involves the private sector and the other interest groups in conducting trade policy dialogues. We have also learned that you are establishing structures in which, like, you have the SADC Business Council. In 1 minute, Mr. Ndabeni, what has been your experience in trying to establish the SADC Business Council? What is it that you can share with other regional economic communities as well as the participants to our workshop today? Was it easy? What were the challenges to bring together the private sector to form the Business Council? If you can reflect on that, Mr. Ndabeni, we will appreciate.
Thank you very much. Well, there has been no problem in establishing the SADC Business Council. The challenge has been, and that has always been the problem, is how this business council going to spearhead their agenda?
I will be telling you
Who
why
is going
you
to finance
might
them? Who is going to sustain them? That's where the
find a huge amount of money.
challenge-
Motorists are linked together. Well, that and much more.
Hello?
Hello, if we are not on the floor, can we please switch off our mics? Thank you.
So
Continue.
I think that has always been the challenge. I worked in the government myself for years, and always the private sector wanted always to participate in some of this meeting. And all the time we invited them to participate, they will also ask you to fund their participation. And that is what has been a problem, and that is still going to be a challenge. I remember almost 10 years ago in SADC Secretariat, we had a desk, a private sector desk that never lasted long because financially it could not sustain its operation, and the desk closed down. And I think that will continue to be a challenge, provided the private sector cannot finance their participation. And I think also one of the biggest challenges we have experienced is that they don't have that capacity in terms of them engaging on trade policy related issue in quite a number of areas. And that is always the lack that they have, that when they are in a meeting, they might have serious challenges to understand how the issue of tariffs, the issue of rules of origin, custom-related issues works. And you may find that even when you go to their umbrella bodies in member states, the so-called national chambers, they may have one or two people who are running that chamber, but they don't have the capacity to analyze any proposal on the table that leads to any trade policy related negotiations. So that is a challenge. But to put these bodies in place, that has never been a problem. The problem is how does that body sustain its operation and ensure that it makes a contribution that is expected from them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ndaveni. I think you have highlighted the issue of capacity of both the stakeholders themselves, as well as probably at the national level, that there's need for capacity on trade policy issues so that they can make effective suggestions or effective proposals to the trade policy formulation. There is one final question before we move on. The question whether Mr. Osoro or Mr. Jacob can take it. It says, are the RECs seeing any duplication of roles and services? I don't know in what capacity or in what way. If yes, this duplication affecting trade policy formulation and negotiations? Let me repeat the question. Are the RECs seeing any duplications of roles and services? If yes, this duplication affecting trade policy, let me just say formulation and negotiations? Then there is a comment which says, if integration is supposed to be citizen-led, then surely equipping citizens to understand policy formulation should be a priority. I think we agree with that. Goes to the issue of capacity. But right now, let me give Mr. Osoro and Mr. Jacob 1 minute each just to try to answer the last question on duplication, maybe on the need to streamline trade policy consultation or trade policy engagement. You have the floor. Let's start with Mr. Osoro.
Okay. Thank you very much. We could turn that question around because regional organizations are there to serve the interests of the members and partner states. Now, they do make the ultimate decision to join these regional organizations by virtue of the stream of benefits that they stand to derive from them. And that comes across through programs and projects. It just so happens that members might join different regional groupings because while they might derive certain benefits from one of the groupings, the same benefits may not pertain to the other. And therefore, they may wish to maximize the opportunities they have by joining different regional organizations. Now, it just so happens that some of these regional organizations could be having programs which are similar. And therefore, there could be some replication in terms of the program activities. And if that so happens, the issue of multiple membership then becomes a challenge. And it is because of that EAC, COMESA, and SADC, for instance, decided to come together to establish the tripartite framework, whose one of the objectives is to address the issue of multiple membership, to harmonize the programs and projects so that members can maximize on the opportunities that pertain to them without without facing the issue of multiplicity of common programs which are replicated across the regs to which they belong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Osoro. Mr. Jacob, your comment in 1 minute, please.
Merci, monsieur le modérateur. Je pense que sur la question de la duplication des rôles, l'expérience que nous vivons est quasiment similaire à celle que vient de décrire le collègue de East African Community. Nous sommes une organisation dans laquelle la question de la multiple appartenance des États aux communautés économiques régionales est un véritable challenge. Nous avons 6 États membres qui sont au sein d'une union douanière au sein de la CEAC, qui elle-même a 11 États membres. Et certains de nos États membres sont impliqués dans des unions douanières d'autres États membres, notamment à l'East African Community. D'autres États membres qui appartiennent à la CEAC sont également à la SADC, l'Angola, la RDC, et plusieurs d'entre eux sont également impliqués dans le COMESA. Nous avons certains autres membres qui sont dans la SENSAD et autres. Là, il n'y a pas beaucoup de problèmes parce que là, ils ne sont pas très avancés dans le processus d'intégration commerciale. Et donc, la mise en œuvre des politiques commerciales est souvent perturbée par cette situation-là, dans la mesure où certains qui sont au sein de l'Union douanière de la CEMAC ont tendance à privilégier les orientations qui sont données au niveau de la CEMAC. Ça cause aussi un problème en termes de duplication de ressources, parce que concevoir et mettre en œuvre les politiques commerciales coûte de l'argent. Et parfois, on se retrouve en train de mettre en œuvre des politiques similaires de manière parallèle de part et d'autre. Et ça nous coûte vraiment, ça perturbe beaucoup les États membres. Et pour ce qui concerne la question des États impliqués dans d'autres communautés, il y a la difficulté à mettre en œuvre les engagements pris dans différents cadres. Par exemple, le Rwanda et le Burundi, ceux qui sont les membres de la CEAC ne peuvent pas aujourd'hui appliquer le tarif préférentiel de la CEAC. Et pour appliquer le tarif préférentiel de la CEAC, ils doivent déroger au tarif extérieur commun de l'East African Community. Et la procédure pour cela est me semble-t-il, assez complexe. Et donc, la conséquence, c'est qu'il y a un problème d'implémentation de politique commerciale. Et pour le résoudre, il y a un processus de rationalisation des communautés économiques régionales qui a été engagé par la conférence instruit, autant pour moi, par la conférence des chefs d'État et de gouvernement de la CEAC, qui est en cours et qui devrait permettre de déboucher sur l'harmonisation des programmes et projets. Toutefois, nous prenons souvent des initiatives comme celles que nous avons engagées en ce moment auprès de l'Union africaine pour solliciter un dialogue avec d'autres communautés pour l'implémentation des instruments de politique commerciale. Par exemple, nous sommes en train d'élaborer nos tarifs extérieurs communs et pour sa mise en œuvre, il y a un défi qui se présente parce que nos États membres qui sont membres de l'Union douanière de l'East African Community ne peuvent pas appliquer 2 tarifs extérieurs communs à la fois. Et donc, du coup, pour conserver la cohésion de la région dans cette étape du processus d'intégration régionale, nous sommes obligés de dialoguer avec l'East African Community et dialoguer également avec le secrétariat de la SADC, où se trouvent certains de nos membres qui risquent de se trouver plus tard dans un processus d'établissement d'un tarif extérieur commun. Donc, il y a vraiment un problème lié à la multiple appartenance qui met en exergue les défis de la duplication des rôles dans le processus d'élaboration et de mise en œuvre des politiques commerciales au niveau régional. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mr. Director, for that. Dear participants, I think it has been a wonderful session in which we have really heard from the REX on how this is supposed to be done, as well as also they have given the challenges they face and the information on how best we as citizens, we as associations can also engage with the trade policy making process at the regional economic community level. Now, we have almost concluded our dialogue, but probably one or two things, especially from yesterday, which was a full session, might have not been very clear, and you would like one or two clarifications to be made. So we have 2 experts that were with us yesterday, who can also come in at this point. This is like a general section to also highlight some of the issues that they think needs to be highlighted. The first issue was the issue of standards. So we have Mr. Amadou Diop, the Inspector of Economic Services at AGSF for Standardization and Quality Promotion in Mali. He was with us yesterday. So we would want to give him probably 5 minutes for him to highlight any issues that he might want also to highlight. And then after that, we also have Madam Kofo Kuje. Apologies for the pronunciation. She's the technical support advisory consultant on women economic and social advancement under the Gracia Machel Trust. So starting with the Mr. Diop, if there's anything that you would also want to highlight on the issue of standards. I had given you 5 minutes, but I just looked at my watch now. I reduced the 5 minutes to 3. Please, Mr. Diop, if there's anything that you would want to highlight. I also want to encourage our participants, if you have any questions from any of the sessions that we have had, please put them in the chat so that we can see how we can progress together. Mr. Diop, please.
OK. Bonjour, merci, Monsieur Charles. Merci de me donner la parole pour donner quelques clarifications par rapport à des questions qui ont été posées, notamment par Madame Doranti. Elle posait la question hier de savoir par rapport aux coûts engagés pour implémenter les normes et puis obtenir la certification, et qu'après les consommateurs ne s'intéressent pas beaucoup à ces produits de qualité. C'est effectivement un constat. Les consommateurs, surtout en Afrique, sont beaucoup tournés vers les produits par rapport au prix que la qualité. Donc, en ce sens, je pense que les États ont beaucoup à faire, notamment en rendant d'application obligatoire les normes pour devenir des réglementations techniques. Donc, en ce sens, les entreprises seront appelées à appliquer ces normes et à chercher la certification sur ces normes-là. Voilà un peu par rapport à sa préoccupation. Aussi, et même par rapport aux procédures de passation des marchés publics, il faut que nos États mettent l'accent sur la qualité des produits dans les processus de marché public. Il ne faut pas acheter des produits par rapport à la passation des marchés qui n'ont pas une durabilité, qui n'ont pas une longue vie. Donc, il faut prioriser les produits qui ont fait l'objet d'une certification. Et là, ça va encourager les entreprises à aller vers l'application des normes, la certification. Maintenant, en termes de, je voulais aussi donner quelques orientations ou quelques recommandations au niveau des CER. Il faut vraiment qu'ils initient des activités de sensibilisation à l'endroit des femmes entrepreneurs en tout ce qui concerne les questions de normes de certification. Et cela vaut aussi au niveau continental. Il est nécessaire de beaucoup communiquer sur ces questions-là. Jusque-là, les questions de normes ne sont pas aussi très bien comprises par les différentes parties prenantes. Et aussi, il faudra veiller aussi à adapter, c'est-à-dire à élaborer des manuels dans des langues qui sont compréhensibles pour les utilisateurs, notamment les femmes. Je donne l'exemple de l'Afrique de l'Est. Je sais que le Swahili est beaucoup parlé là-bas et ils peuvent élaborer des manuels en Swahili par rapport aux normes, par rapport à la qualité, pour donner ça aux femmes utilisateurs pour qu'elles puissent mieux appliquer ces normes-là. Voilà quelques orientations et puis recommandations à l'endroit des CER et puis à l'endroit de l'Union africaine ou à l'endroit de la ZLECA, du secrétariat de la ZLECA. Merci beaucoup. C'est ce que je voulais intervenir.
Vraiment, merci, Monsieur Ahmad Diop, for the answers that you have given. We really appreciate for being present today, also looking at the issues that we have. At this point, let me also give a chance to Madame Coco Kujo, if she has anything that she wants to add, especially in regards to the questions that came on the floor yesterday. Madame Coco, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. I don't remember too many of the questions from yesterday, but I really feel like one of the, the communication about the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement and this processes of stakeholder engagement is not very clear. It's not very strong and it's not very clear. Because when I speak to quite a lot of women, they kind of have a sense of it, they've heard of it, but they don't know how to engage. I posed the question earlier to say, do we have a contact list of where these committees can be found? And I appreciate all the speakers today who did allude to, how the process in SADC, in EAC, and in ECCAS. But I think, just in terms of where, just headlines of where some of these topical issues can be identified on a platform will be really important. I think we're all ambassadors here. I've already made a big communication since being here in the last 2 days to go out there, because I realize if we really want women to engage, we need to do much more in the communication to be able to get their full attention, not just as entrepreneurs. So at the association level, our business is to keep filtering the information, but there's also something about how people really internalize it and take it seriously, because there's also cynicism about this whole process. So my just final word is that we really need to take the communication of what we're trying to do here very seriously, and for citizens to know that this should matter to them. My headline to them is access to markets for you women. This is it. This is Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement and linked to access to markets. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. With that comment, ladies and gentlemen and dear participants, I want to thank you so much for your attention. for today. We closed on the issue of information. That information is very key on how best we can engage with the policy making process. On our side as the African Union Commission, I think it's one of the recommendations that we are going to take forward to say we need to work with the regional economic communities as well as the RECs, probably to publish contact points of where the different associations, whether it's women and youth, can easily get information for various trade agreements or trade opportunities that are there. So probably the starting point is at the national level with the countries or member states that have already established what we call AfCFTA national contact points. I know the RECs also have a similar types of structure where the citizens as well as the associations can make contact with the regional economic communities. But what is very key is to ensure that that information is available in our regional economic communities as well as at the national level. I see an interesting comment from, is it Chelan Bosien? I think they want to join the learning and development. I don't know from which region they are, but if they can indicate, then people here can assist you, Chelan Bosien, to see where you belong and which association that you could be associated with. So with that, I really want to thank very much our various speakers for this session. Mr. Geoffrey Osolo from the East African Community, Mr. Alfred Ndaveni from SADC, Mr. Jacob Kocho from the ECCAS, and we also had Mr. Amadou Diop as well as Madame Coco Kuje, who have also highlighted where exactly, who have also highlighted the questions that came in yesterday, and we did not have time to look at them. I see from the chat that Chelan Bosen has been assisted, but we can take that further. Engagements is a continuous process, and we need to continue on how best we can engage in trade policy making. Having said that, we are now drawing close to the close of our program, not only for today, but also for the 3 days. So what we are going to do now is just to share our screen where we are going to highlight the recommendations that we have drawn from the 3 days of our engagement. In that case, I would like Maulo or Anahita to help me share my screen.
Hi, Charles. Yes, you already have access to it. You can just click on it right below on your screen.
Okay. Let me try to do that and share my screen so that we can go together and look at some of the recommendations that we have captured in the last 3 days. Thereafter, I think we are going to conclude by concluding remarks, of course, from the partners that have been involved in the organization of this very interesting 3-day forum. Okay, I'm still trying to figure out where I share my screen. There it is. I would need confirmation whether everyone can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Thank you so much.
Yes, we can see.
Thank you so much for the confirmation. So I'll just go through through a readout of the recommendations starting from the first day. So the first recommendation says member states, regional economic communities, and the African Union Commission are encouraged to establish inclusive and representative trade policy dialogue forums at national, regional, and continental levels in order to ensure inclusiveness and stakeholder buy-in when developing and implementing trade policies, especially under the African Continental Free Trade Area. We have learned that some RECs already have this, some member states already have this, but there are some which are still missing, especially in relation to the AfCFTA. Then the second one says member states are encouraged to consult all stakeholders when coming up with national offensive and defensive interests when negotiating trade agreements. Our colleague from EAC, I think, dwelt very much on that. So where this is not happening, member states are encouraged to make sure that it's happening. The third one says member states need to advance trade policy interests that are suitable for women, youth, and youth in business. I think on the first day, there was a general outcry that probably the policies are not women and youth friendly. So this recommendation is coming from there. But for us to effectively do that, I think there's need that we engage in the process so that our voices are held. Then the fourth one says member states need to identify stakeholders and facilitate their access to participate at national, regional, continental, and international trade platforms. The fifth one talks to us as stakeholders that we are encouraged to check if our countries and regions have trade policy dialogue forums and similar forums such as the AfCFTA national committees. And we are also encouraged to effectively participate therein. And finally, we have a recommendation again going to us as stakeholders to ensure that we build networks at the national, regional, and continental levels to enable access to a much broader stakeholder community, as well as make our contributions in trade policy making. I think this has come out today again. I think when we work together through associations, whether it's business councils, it's easier to get our voices heard, whether at the national or regional or continental levels. So I think those networks are important. Where they are already in place, I think it's good that we make sure that their capacity is that level where they are able to engage effectively. Then on day 2, I think we have also a number of recommendations coming out. As we said, day 2 concentrated on women in business. So the first is a very specific recommendations that trade platforms should stratify business people by size of business and gender. We will see how best the ITC can do that. Then the second recommendation, which is number 8 on the screen, talks to capacity building on standards for women producers and entrepreneurs so that they improve the quality of goods they produce, as well as improve their market access. I think Mr. Diop also highlighted this issue today. Then the number 9 says there's need for the AU, the RECs, and other development partners to provide training to women in business and improve their access to information on trade facilitation measures at the borders, as well as how to utilize the simplified trade regime so as to improve women's participation in trade. I think, again, it goes back to availability of information. Information is key in all this. Then number 10 talks about digital trade. It says the AUC, the REX, and ITC She Trades Initiative should facilitate capacity building programs on digital trade for women entrepreneurs, as well as building confidence and trust to promote digitization in women producers, service providers, as well as the entrepreneurs. It is quite mouthful, but I think the idea is there is need for capacity building and training on how women producers or women in trade can utilize the digital era in their businesses. Number 11 talks to member states. It says member states are encouraged to promote gender equality in border operations, as well as stakeholder relations. I think number 11 talks of the need to make sure that we include women in all the policies that we enact, especially in our border relations. Then number 12 talks about member states need to encourage the participation of women in AfCFTA national committees, as well as national trade facilitation committees. We have talked about this at length even today, but the key, I think, is the information, making sure that there is enough information available on how the various stakeholders can engage in national, regional, and continental processes. I think this continues to be the big elephant in the room. Then there's need to create solutions and opportunities for other women in business, such as women producers, including stakeholder mapping and needs assessment. I think the idea here is we are going to tie this recommendation nicely, but I think we need to know what are the needs of women in business so that they can effectively engage in trade. That can be effectively done if we have stakeholder mapping as well as needs assessment. I think today this point was eloquently tackled by the Director of Trade from ECCAS, who talked about baseline surveys before policy engagement. So I think that summarizes the recommendations for the second day. Then today, we had intervention from regional economic communities. Number 14 talks about availability and the need to establish and strengthen stakeholder dialogues at the regional level. I think we had excellent examples from EAC, how they do it. So for those RECs that are yet not doing this, probably we need to make sure that these dialogue forums are available. But the good thing is that the 3 RECs that we have engaged with today have shown us that these at least are available in various forms and ways. Then number 15 talks about the need for making sure that there are adequate resources for conducting stakeholder dialogue forums to ensure there is sustainability. I think SADC indicated that they had a desk for private sector, but due to lack of resources, that desk died a natural death. But I think the issue is availability of resources in that regard to make sure that the stakeholder dialogue forums are maintained. This also goes to development partners as well as agencies like ITC, that there's need to support such type of endeavors. Then number 16 talks about they need to carry out surveys as well as studies to provide adequate information for use in engaging with stakeholders on trade policy. You do not need just to go and talk to them about any subjects, but the surveys are important, the studies are important, as they will give you the type of information that is relevant to be handled by the stakeholders. Otherwise, you end up talking to them, for example, about very complicated rules of origin, which the stakeholders might not understand, and hence they might not engage effectively. Which leads us now to number 17, which talks about the need for capacity building programs for all stakeholders in carrying out stakeholder dialogue engagements. I think it was also clear from the presentations that we had today that one of the challenges is that there might not be adequate personnel, human personnel, to conduct trade policy dialogue, as well as even the stakeholders themselves might not have adequate information on what is trade policy and going forward, how is it done, then they might not engage effectively. So there's need for capacity building in that regard. Again, here we are looking at such partners as the ITC She Trade Initiative. Maybe they can come up with a program, for example, targeting women in business on what is trade policy and what are the issues that are addressed and how can the women engage effectively. Then lastly, there's need to establish a national and regional contact points for stakeholder engagement for conducting dialogues on trade policy. I think this is the last point of the day that I think we emphasized, to say that maybe those platforms are there, maybe those channels are there, whether at the national level or the regional level, as well as at the continental level, but the stakeholders don't know where to go so that they can engage. So I think that information needs to be made available in the various channels that we have in place, whether at the national, regional, or continental level. So, dear participants, distinguished participants, this is a set of recommendations that I think we have generated through our 3 days engagement in this forum. You see that there's need for more, but you know how we are working virtually, we might have challenges. So I'll just conclude by highlighting some of the issues that we are going to take forward, especially for us as institutions involved in this. So one of the issues we endeavor to do is to make sure that there are adequate trade policy dialogue forums in all the regional economic communities in Africa, so that there is adequate participation by the stakeholders in trade policy making. Then the issue of building capacities, not only in the REX, but also for stakeholders, is something that as institutions, we are also going to make sure that it's well addressed. The need to establish a continent-wide network of women in business in Africa, so that they are able to air their views at the continental level, including under the just established African Business Council, is something that we are going to take forward to see how best we can do this. Then in the same manner, my computer is threatening to close down, but we hope that by then we are going to be through. In the same manner, the issue of capacity building, including on the digital trade and trade facilitation, is something that we are also going to highlight in our programming going forward. So then the issue of a high-level conference on trade policy dialogue, is something that we will see how best we can do that now that we have gone through all the regional economic communities. I think it would be very important to make sure that we bring everything together. Then finally, one of the issues that we are going to take going forward is to ensure that we engage our partners, GIZ and ITC, to produce some guidelines and best practices on conducting trade policy dialogues, and whether it's at the national, regional, and continental levels. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a high-level recap of our 3-day workshop where we have been dealing with these issues. I hope you've been able to find it very informative, if not interesting. What is most important is the information that we get. Then we will see how best we could go forward in making sure that the things that have been highlighted, not only in this document, but all the other insights that you can share after this will also be taken into account. Just to conclude in this part is that very soon the African Union Commission will engage in a number of processes for the AfCFTA. As you might be aware, as indicated during the introduction of the workshop by the director of the African Union Department of Trade and Industry, who was here with us, we are planning to start trading under the AfCFTA on 1st January 2021. And it will be crucial for us to make sure that all the stakeholders are ready. So we will be taking some of these recommendations to those forums that have been lined up, and we will make sure that all the stakeholders also participate going forward. So with that, let me leave you with that, let me leave you with the recommendations, and then we proceed to the closing ceremony for the workshop. But as we said, we continue to look forward to engaging in this manner. Your requests for copies of recommendations, as well as the copies of some of the presentations, has been duly taken note of, and I think in the coming days we'll be making available these documents to you. So let me now invite our partners to make their closing remarks. I will start with the representative from GIZ. If they are available, please take the floor and provide your closing remarks. GIZ, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Charles, Chair. This is Xaver Keller from the GIZ Support Project to the AfCFTA. I hope that you can hear me well.
We can hear you well, and we'd be grateful if we could also see your face, Xaver.
Unfortunately, my internet connection is quite weak here, but let me try. So I hope now you should be able to see me.
Yes, you do. Go ahead.
Okay, please. Great. Thank you so much, Charles. So, dear Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, on behalf of GIZ, I really want to thank and congratulate you all very much for this timely and important workshop to enhance and strengthen regional trade policy dialogue platforms. I really want to thank the AUC for steering and hosting this important event, and I want to thank ITC for organizing it. We all know that the current weeks are extremely busy with the extraordinary summit, as well as the start of trading under the AfCFTA approaching very soon. But I think it's a very good sign that you still took the time for this very important event, despite the enormous amount of other negotiation meetings happening these weeks. We all know that the RECs have been at the forefront of regional economic integration, and they will continue to do so as a building block of the AfCFTA. And moreover, businesses, entrepreneurs, and women traders, academia, and civil society, among many others, are all part of the mix that ultimately will have to take advantage of the agreement and make the AfCFTA work for the people across the countries. Germany, through GIZ, supports the Department of Trade and Industry in creating such needed dialogue forums and platforms within Germany's broader support to drive economic integration through the AfCFTA across 3 levels: the AU, the RECs, and the member states. And we have supported previous trade policy forums for different RECs in the past years. So this one is actually a continuation of previous events, as you probably know. And Germany also directly supports the ITC She Trades initiative, which successfully bridges these many gaps and creates platforms to bring together women traders and women entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, I personally was not able to participate in all the discussions throughout the past 3 days, but from what I heard and from the recommendations that Charles has just presented, I'm very convinced that the event was successful in bringing together the views from different stakeholders and to really guide the way forward for stakeholder engagement in the context of the AfCFTA. What we are particularly delighted also to see is that you're planning to strengthen stakeholder engagement really on all 3 levels: the continental, the regional, and also then on the national level. And also, for example, to use the national AfCFTA committees in this regard. This kind of integrated multi-level approach, I think, is really necessary to harness the full potential of the AfCFTA. And this is exactly also the basis of the German support to the AfCFTA, which is also designed in such a sort of integrated multi-level manner. And so I don't want to take much more time. I think the recommendations that Charles has read to us and that you all have developed over the past 3 days, they really are a great summary and a clear way forward. So I think from our side as GIZ and as German cooperation, I really want to reaffirm that the German commitment to support the AfCFTA and stakeholder engagement in that context remains very strong. We're very honored to be part and to remain part of this process. And I just want to thank you all for your participation and wish you all the best for the next steps, which we will happily continue to support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zava, for the concluding remarks, and we indeed look forward to your continued support in the various processes, especially in regards to stakeholder engagement and participation in the AfCFTA. You have seen the recommendations are rich, and you'll be able to pick which ones GIZ can effectively support. Let me now give a chance to the representative from ITC to also provide their concluding remarks. Mr. Simon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Charles, and great to connect with you all. Excellencies, directors, ladies and gents. And let me also say ambassadors, as we all are for AfCFTA, as somebody pointed out a little bit earlier. On behalf of ITC, I would like to sincerely thank AUC and GIZ for making this event possible. Thank you to all our participants for their commitments by joining this at such a busy time, as has been said, their commitment to policy making by joining the discussions over the last 3 days and providing their inputs. Thank you to our speakers across all the sessions for sharing their expertise and experiences to really shape the conversation. And thank you to you, Charles, for your expert moderation. I have been able to join today and see how the strategies for multi-stakeholder engagement have been covered, along with priorities for women on standards, trade facilitation, services, and digital trade. and heard from ECCAS, EAC, and SADC on trade policy dialogues in their regions. I think the recommendations that you've gone through today, Charles, are a reflection of the quality of this dialogue, and they've given us an indication and a roadmap for future work to make sure everyone benefits equally from participation in trade. From an ITC perspective, I note, for example, the recommendation related to capacity building in digital trade, which I can say is a priority, guided as we are by the needs of entrepreneurs. I also note the recommendation today on stakeholder dialogues and engagements to ensure sustainability. And on this note, we look forward to continuing the discussion on women and the AfCFTA starting next week. We have a series of virtual sessions for women's associations starting next week through to January 2021 on finalizing AfCFTA Phase 1 issue recommendations and developing recommendations on investment, competition policy, and intellectual property, effective policy advocacy strategies, and finally, let's not forget network building also. Thank you again, and we hope you will join us again as we navigate the future of the AfCFTA together. Thank you, Charles. Back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Simon, for taking the floor and also concluding for us. We also thank you for already picking some of the issues that ITC is going to dwell on, especially on capacity building of women in business and women in trade. So it just remains for me on behalf of the African Union Commission also thank all of you who have participated in this important workshop. As I said before, we hope that it has been helpful to you and also to your various constituencies that you belong. Let me also thank our interpreters that have allowed us to communicate effectively by bridging the language barrier from French to English for the past 3 days. We are really grateful interpreters for the services that you have given to us today. It has been very clear. That's why we do not have major challenges in regards to what we wanted to communicate across. At this point, let me just wish all of you a wonderful weekend. I hope now you can go and rest effectively in your various workstations. With these remarks, I really wish you all the best, and let's continue conducting our trade policy dialogues in the manner and look forward for more interventions. So once again, thank you so much to everyone. Thank you.